So picture this. You run a company that manufactures, cutting-edge technology, and the year is 1959.
Okay, setting the scene. I like it.
Right, so you have just built this machine that is undeniably going to change the world. It is just this massive leap forward in productivity.
It's a total game changer.
Exactly. But there is one really big problem here. The machine is so wildly expensive to manufacture that literally no one in your target market can actually afford to buy it.
Which is a pretty terrible position for a business to be in.
Yeah, it's kind of the worst case scenario. So what do? Well, if you're the Xerox Corporation and the machine is the very first automatic plain paper copier, you don't just go back to the drawing board to build a worse, cheaper machine.
Right, you don't compromise the tech.
No, you invent an entirely new operating system for how business is done. You don't sell the machine at all, you lease it, and then you charge your customers for every single copy they make.
Which is just a brilliant pivot. It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. We know you, our listener, are intensely curious. You're constantly looking for those underlying frameworks that make this chaotic modern world actually make sense.
And today we are exploring a singular, honestly revolutionary source that provides exactly that kind of framework.
Yeah, we're diving into excerpts from a phenomenal handbook called Business Model Generation.
Though, honestly, calling it a handbook or a textbook kind of does it a massive disservice.
Yeah, it really does.
It's much more of a field guide. It was designed specifically for visionaries, game changers and challengers who are looking at their own industries and realizing that the old ways of doing things are just fundamentally broken.
And the way this book actually came into existence is just as fascinating as the content itself. I mean, it wasn't written by some solitary academic sitting in a dusty university tower.
Right, totally divorced from the actual reality of the market.
Exactly. This was co-created by a crowd of 470 strategy practitioners, and they were from 45 different countries.
That is a massive collaboration. It is wild. They collaborated, debated, and refined these concepts together, and then they financed and produced it entirely independently of the traditional publishing industry.
Bypassing the legacy gatekeepers altogether.
Yeah, they literally practiced the very innovation that they are preaching in the text.
Which gives the framework an incredible amount of credibility.
Right.
Because they utilize an innovative model to actually bring this knowledge to the world.
Absolutely.
But before we get completely lost in the weeds of these modern examples, we need to establish the foundational definition that the text provides right at the very start.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's deceptively simple, but incredibly profound. They define it as this. A business model describes the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value.
Creates, delivers, and captures value. Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because why should you, listening right now, actually care about this specific definition?
Right. It's a fair question.
I mean, maybe you aren't the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Maybe you're a software engineer or an independent artist, or you're just trying to prep for some strategy meeting on Monday morning. Why is this framework relevant to you?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we are living in an era of unprecedented volatility.
Oh, for sure.
Entire, deeply established industries are crumbling almost overnight, while these complete upstarts are reinventing the landscape.
Yeah, you see legacy media companies flailing while independent creators build these massive empires.
Exactly. Or you see century-old automotive giants scrambling to catch up to tech companies.
Yeah.
Understanding this framework isn't just a purely executive exercise anymore.
No, it's really not.
It is for anyone you, listening right now, who wants to understand how the companies you buy from actually function. It's for understanding the invisible forces driving the economy.
Or crucially, it's for understanding how to launch your own innovative idea without it just collapsing under its own weight.
Yes, it is quite literally about seeing the matrix of commerce.
Seeing the matrix. I love that. And to see that matrix clearly, we are going to unpack what the text calls the 9 building blocks of the business model canvas.
But we have to set the stage first. Because business model innovation is not some new Silicon Valley fad that got invented in a garage in the 1990s.
Right, not at all.
While the speed and the global scale of innovation today are definitely unprecedented, the text traces the lineage of this concept back centuries. The fundamental need to figure out how a new idea sustains itself financially is ancient.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's think about Johannes Gutenberg in the 15th century.
Right, the printing press, the ultimate technological disruption.
Exactly. But Gutenberg didn't just invent a mechanical printing device and stop there. An invention is not a business.
Right, a pile of wood and metal doesn't make you any money.
Exactly. He had to seek out applications for it. He had to figure out how to capture value from this new technology. He had to source the paper, formulate the ink, and ultimately decide what to actually print.
Which was the Bible.
Right, because he had to ensure there was a market willing to pay for the massive capital expenditure he just undertook. He was literally iterating on a business model.
That was so interesting. And then fast forward a few centuries, and the text brings up a brilliant example from 1950, the Diners Club.
Oh yeah, the original credit card.
Right. Introducing the credit card was a pure, unadulterated business model innovation. They didn't invent a new physical product.
No, a piece of cardboard or plastic isn't revolutionary.
Exactly. They invented a mechanism of trust and deferred payment. They basically created a multi-sided market out of thin air.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
It is. They convinced restaurants to pay a fee to accept the card, and they convinced wealthy patrons that carrying the card was this status symbol that offered convenience.
What's fascinating here is how these historical examples mirror exactly what is happening today. The Xerox example you mentioned at the top of the show is the perfect illustration of this.
The Model 914.
Right. It was a technological marvel. But the business model is what actually changed the world. By shifting from a massive upfront capital purchase to a leasing model with a per-copy fee, Xerox just completely removed the friction of adoption.
They aligned their revenue directly with the customer's usage.
Exactly. The more value the customer got from the machine, the more money Xerox made.
That is the perfect analogy. It's like a technological operating system update.
Oh, I like that phrase.
Right. It's not that the physical product changed. The copier sitting in the office was the exact same heavy, complex machine. But the rules of how that product made money, the operating system of the business itself, received a massive upgrade.
Precisely. And that is what we are seeing today, just at absolute warp speed.
Yeah, the text highlights several modern game changers to illustrate this point.
Look at Apple. We all remember the iPod.
Oh yeah, definitely had one.
Right. But Apple didn't become the dominant force in digital music just because the iPod was a cool device with a little click wheel. There were other MP3 players on the market long before the iPod.
Yeah, I remember the Diamond Rio and all those clunky early players. They just kind of held files.
Exactly. They were basically just hard drives. Apple's genius was the ecosystem. They paired the hardware of the iPod with the software of iTunes and the digital storefront of the iTunes Music Store.
And they negotiated with the notoriously stubborn record labels to unbundle the album and sell songs for 99 cents.
Which was unthinkable at the time. It was the seamless integration of hardware, software, and content delivery, the complete business model that secured their dominance. The iPod was just the physical manifestation of that model.
That makes total sense. Or look at Skype. The text points to them as a massive disruptor. They became the world's largest carrier of international voice traffic, and they didn't lay a single copper wire across the ocean.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. They utilized peer-to-peer technology, routing calls through their users' own internet connections to offer dirt-cheap global calling rates and entirely free Skype-to-Skype calls.
They bypassed the traditional, incredibly expensive telecom infrastructure entirely.
And then you have Zipcar, which the text highlights as a response to environmental concerns and the realities of modern urbanization.
Yeah, they looked at the automotive industry and realized that for many city dwellers, owning a car is a terrible value proposition.
Oh, it's the worst. You pay for the car, the insurance, the parking, the maintenance, and the vehicle just sits idle 95% of the time.
Right, it's a terrible use of capital.
Yeah.
So Zipcar offered hourly, on-demand car rentals. You don't own the car, you just pay a membership fee and an hourly rate when you actually need it.
They turned a depreciating physical asset into a shared service.
Exactly. And it's crucial to note that these models aren't strictly for maximizing corporate shareholder profit.
Right. The canvas isn't just a tool for Wall Street.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The text highlights Grameen Bank, founded by Mohammed Yunus, which popularized microlending to the absolute poorest populations.
The traditional banking model said that people without collateral were completely unbankable, like lending to them was a guaranteed loss.
Right. But Grameen Bank flicked that assumption on its head. They created a system of peer support groups that ensured incredibly high repayment rates on tiny, tiny loans.
They proved that an innovative business model can have a profound, direct social impact by alleviating poverty, all while remaining financially sustainable.
Which brings us to the specific personas. the text outlines. They call them the 7 faces of innovation.
Oh yeah, this part is really cool.
It really shows the incredible diversity of who actually needs this knowledge. It's not just tech founders in hoodies. For example, they highlight Jean-Pierre Cuoni, a chairman at EFG International.
A Swiss private bank.
Right. He took a hard look at the private banking industry, which is this notoriously conservative, old-school sector built on centuries of tradition and profoundly transformed how they operate by applying these exact principles to wealth management.
Then you have someone like Iqbal Quadir, who is a fascinating case study.
Definitely.
He used Grameen Bank's existing network to bring telecom to 100 million people in Bangladesh via Grameen phone.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Traditional Western telecom companies looked at Bangladesh and saw a country where the average income was literally pennies a day.
Right.
Their traditional business model dictated that no one could afford a cell phone, so they completely refused to build the infrastructure. But Quadir realized that a phone isn't a luxury item, it's a productivity tool.
So he partnered with Grameen Bank to give microloans to women in remote villages to buy a single cell phone.
Exactly. That woman became the village phone lady. She charged her neighbors a tiny fee to make calls to check crop prices or contact relatives.
So the phone paid for itself, the village got connected, and the telecom company got massive volume.
It's a complete inversion of the traditional model. It solves the distribution and the capital problems simultaneously.
It's brilliant. And the text also points to entrepreneurs like Marielle Seigers. She looked at unsatisfied customer needs in the corporate world and co-invented seats2meet.com.
Yeah, she realized that so much real estate just sits dormant all day, while independent workers and small teams desperately need flexible, on-the-fly booking for meeting spaces.
So she created a platform that matched that dormant supply with the emergent demand, utilizing totally untraditional locations.
And what's wild is that the text makes a point to say that whether you are an entrepreneur deep inside a massive, slow-moving corporation,
Like they mentioned Dag Finmeyer from the text, who was tasked with exploring sustainable models within Telenor, a giant telecom operator.
right, or you are a solitary designer like Trish Papadarkos, who has a brilliant creative idea but maybe lacks the formal MBA business vocabulary. All of these people need the exact same thing,
And what's that?
a shared visual language. If a graphic designer, a Swiss private banker, and a social activist in Bangladesh can all look at a single intuitive framework, it levels the playing field completely.
It strips away all that intimidating corporate jargon.
Exactly. It allows them to systematically challenge assumptions, identify flaws in their logic, and actually design the future of their respective fields.
Okay, so let's get into that shared language. Let's look at the actual blueprint. The text lays out the 9-block canvas. And the very first piece, the foundation of the front stage of the business, is customer segments.
Which makes total sense.
Because, as the text bluntly puts it, without profitable customers, no company survives for long. You can have the greatest technology in the world, but if no one is willing to pay for it, you essentially have a hobby, not a business.
Right. An organization has to make very conscious, deliberate decisions about exactly who they are going to serve, and, perhaps even more importantly, who they are going to actively ignore.
You cannot be everything to everyone.
No, you really can't.
Yeah.
If you try to design a product for every single human on Earth, you end up with a compromised mess that no one actually loves. You have to group your potential customers into distinct segments based on common needs, behaviors, purchasing power, or other defining attributes.
And the text breaks down a few distinct types of these segments to show how different strategies apply. First, you have the mass market.
Right, this is your classic consumer electronics sector.
Yeah, think of the companies making standard flat-screen televisions or basic refrigerators. They don't make huge, complex distinctions between different customer segments. They focus on one massive, generalized group with broadly similar needs.
The value proposition, the distribution channels, the customer relationships, they all focus on massive volume and broad appeal.
Contrast that broad approach with a niche market.
Right. These businesses cater to highly specific, incredibly specialized requirements. The text uses a great example of car part manufacturers who are entirely dependent on major automobile makers.
Okay, so if you manufacture a highly specific microchip that only goes into the braking system of a German luxury car,
Your entire business model is uniquely tailored to that one specific buyer-supplier relationship.
Mm.
You don't need a massive marketing budget or retail storefronts. You need deep, technical integration with your one or two massive clients.
So it's mass volume versus deep specialization, but then you have segmented markets, which is where things get really nuanced.
Yeah, this is fascinating.
The text mentions Credit Suisse. They are a bank, right? But they have their retail banking arm serving clients with assets up to maybe $100,000. These people need basic checking, maybe a mortgage, standard credit cards.
Right, everyday banking needs.
But then Credit Suisse has a completely separate group of affluent clients whose net worth exceeds $500,000 or into the millions. They are all technically banking customers, but their needs are substantially different.
The affluent clients need complex tax structuring, estate planning, and bespoke investment advice.
Exactly. So the bank basically has to run two almost entirely different operational models under the same roof.
Or take Micro Precision Systems, a company that text notes serves the watch industry, the medical industry, and industrial automation.
Oh, right. A tiny motor goes into a luxury watch, a surgical tool, and a factory robot.
Exactly. It's the same core capability, but slightly different value propositions and sales channels for each distinct segment.
And here's where we see some truly disruptive, almost magical shifts in business strategy. Diversified markets.
Yes. This is when an organization takes a look at its assets and decides to serve two completely unrelated segments with very different needs. The prime example from the text is Amazon.com's massive pivot in 2006.
Right, the launch of AWS Amazon Web Services, which, if you think about it from the outside, is such a massive, seemingly illogical pivot.
It really looks crazy on paper.
You go from selling books and CDs to retail consumers to suddenly selling raw IT infrastructure, server space, and database management to web companies. At the time, Wall Street thought Jeff Bezos had just totally lost his mind. Like, how does selling Harry Potter books prepare you to run the backbone of the internet?
But the underlying rationale makes perfect, elegant sense when you look at it through the lens of the canvas. Amazon already had this incredibly powerful, massive IT infrastructure built for their retail operations.
Right. They had to build servers that could handle the insane traffic spikes of the holiday shopping season.
Exactly. But for the rest of the year, a huge portion of that computing power just sat completely idle. It was a massive sunk cost.
So they realized that computing power itself was a resource they could package and sell.
They shared that existing resource and catered to a totally different customer segment, software developers and other tech companies. They diversified their market and accidentally built the most profitable arm of their entire empire.
That is the power of really understanding your underlying resources. Finally, you have multi-sided platforms or multi-sided markets. This is a concept that dominates the modern tech landscape.
Yes. This is where you absolutely need two or more interdependent segments to make the model work at all. Think of a credit card company like Visa.
Okay.
They're completely useless if they only have millions of cardholders, but no merchants who actually accept the card.
Right. I can't buy coffee if the coffee shop doesn't take Visa.
Conversely, no merchant will pay the fee to install a card reader if no customers are carrying the plastic. It's a classic chicken and egg problem.
Or look at a free daily newspaper you get at the subway station. They need a massive, engaged reader base to attract lucrative advertisers. But they desperately need the revenue from those advertisers to actually finance the printing and distribution of the paper.
Exactly. It's like throwing a massive party where you need to convince both the hottest band in town and all the guests to show up at the exact same time.
If the guests think the band isn't coming, they stay home. If the band thinks the venue will be empty, they cancel.
If either side of that multi-sided platform loses faith and collapses, the entire business model falls apart instantly. The platform has to provide value to both sides simultaneously to maintain the equilibrium.
So once you have clearly defined exactly who you are serving your distinct customer segments, you have to figure out what exactly you're offering them to solve their problems, which leads us directly to the second block of the canvas, value propositions.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this.
The value proposition is the fundamental reason a customer chooses one company over another. It's the bundle of products and services that solves a specific problem or satisfies a specific need for a specific segment.
Okay.
But let me push back for a second here. When we use a term like value proposition, especially in corporate meetings, isn't that just dressed up business jargon for we made a better product? Like, my phone has a better camera, so that's my value proposition.
This is a very common misconception, actually. But the text is adamant that it's not necessarily just about a better physical product.
Really?
Yeah. While improving performance has traditionally been a very common way to create value, Think of the PC sector in the 90s and 2000s, constantly bringing out faster machines with more RAM. The text explicitly notes that performance has its limits.
Okay, how so?
Well, we see this today. Faster PCs and massive amounts of storage don't automatically produce a corresponding growth in customer demand if the customer doesn't actually need that speed to just browse the web or check email.
Right. If I'm just reading the news, I don't need a supercomputer.
Exactly. Value spans a much wider spectrum.
Yeah.
It includes the quantitative, absolutely, like price, speed, and efficiency, but it heavily involves the qualitative, like design, brand identity, and the overall customer experience.
So it's not just our product is 10% faster. It could be newness.
Yes, newness is huge.
The text mentions how the introduction of cell phones created an entirely new industry around needs people didn't even know they had until the technology existed. We didn't know we needed to be reachable at all times until we actually could be.
Right. Or take ethical investment funds. That's not a new technological invention. A mutual fund is an old concept.
Right.
But an ethical fund satisfies a totally new set of values for investors who want to align their money with their morals. The value is ideological, not technological.
Exactly. Another deeply fascinating value proposition the text explores is simply getting the job done. And the example they use is Rolls-Royce, which is brilliant.
Oh yeah, this is a great case study.
Rolls-Royce manufactures massive, incredibly complex jet engines for commercial airliners. Historically, an airline would buy the engines for millions of dollars and then take on the massive burden of maintaining them, repairing them, and dealing with the catastrophic downtime if one broke.
Right, which is a massive operational headache for an airline whose only real goal is to just keep planes in the sky moving passengers.
Precisely. So Rolls-Royce shifted their value proposition entirely. They introduced a model called Power by the Hour.
I love that name.
It's so good. They essentially told the airlines, you don't want to worry about maintaining engines. You just want to fly planes. So we will retain ownership of the engine, we will service it, we will monitor it constantly, and we will simply charge you a flat fee for every hour that the engine is actively running and propelling your plane.
That is wild. It completely shifts the risk. It's not buy our incredibly expensive engine and hope it doesn't break. It's we guarantee you propulsion and you only pay when you are successfully flying.
That is a massive shift in value. It turns a massive capital expenditure for the airline into a predictable operational expenditure, and it perfectly aligns incentives. Rolls-Royce is now highly motivated to build the most reliable engine possible because if it breaks, they stop getting paid.
It's a flawless alignment of customer need and corporate capability.
Yeah.
Then you have highly qualitative values like brand or status. Let's be honest. People don't buy a Rolex because it tells time 100 times better than a Casio.
No, they definitely don't.
They buy it to signify wealth, success, and belonging to an exclusive club. The value proposition is entirely psychological. Conversely, the text notes that skateboarders might wear underground, obscure brands specifically to show they are culturally in and anti-mainstream. The status is the value.
Then, of course, you have the most universal quantitative value, price.
Right. Offering similar value to the market, but at a significantly lower price. This is the entire foundation of airlines like Southwest in the U.S. or EasyJet and Ryanair in Europe.
They didn't just decide to charge less and take a loss. They designed entirely new, ultra-lean business models around unbundling the flight experience to enable low-cost travel.
Or look at Tata's Nano car in India, which the text highlights. It was engineered from the ground up, stripping away non-essentials, to be designed so affordably that it made automobile ownership suddenly accessible to a whole new segment of the Indian population who previously could only afford motorcycles.
Which ties perfectly into another core value proposition.
Yeah.
Accessibility, making things available to people who previously lacked the capital or the infrastructure to access them.
Yes, the text mentions NetJets, which popularized fractional private jet ownership.
Historically, if you wanted the convenience of flying private, you had to buy a $20 million jet, hire pilots, and pay for hangar space. NetJets said buy 1/16 of a jet, you get the access, but we handle the logistics.
Suddenly, a luxury reserved for billionaires became accessible to mere millionaires. Or think about mutual funds historically, which allowed people with modest wealth to pool their money and build diversified portfolios that were previously only available to the ultra-wealthy.
And finally, you have risk and cost reduction. Salesforce.com is the textbook example the text uses here.
Oh yeah, they revolutionized software.
Before Salesforce, if a company wanted customer relationship management CRM software, they had to buy physical servers, buy the software licenses, hire an IT team to install it, and pay for endless maintenance.
It was a nightmare.
Salesforce hosted the CRM on their own servers and delivered it via the web. They saved buyers the massive expense and the agonizing headache of IT management.
Or, on a much simpler scale, simply offering a comprehensive one-year guarantee on a used car. You aren't just selling the car, you are selling peace of mind, which is a highly potent value proposition that directly reduces the customer's perceived risk.
So if we look at the canvas so far, we have our customer segments and we have our value propositions. We know exactly who we are serving, and we know exactly what amazing problem-solving thing we're giving them.
Right, the front stage is set.
But here is the critical juncture. If those two elements never physically or digitally meet, the business does not exist. This brings us to the necessary bridge between the offer and the audience, channels and customer relationships.
Right, so let's move across the canvas to channels. This is how a company actually communicates with and reaches its customer segments to deliver that value. It's the touch points. And a channel isn't just a store shelf. The text outlines 5 distinct sequential phases of a channel that every customer goes through.
Yes, it's a complete journey. First is awareness. How do we even let people know our products or services exist?
Second is evaluation. Once they know we exist, how do we help them evaluate our specific value proposition against the competition?
Third is purchase. How do we actually facilitate them buying it? Is it a click on a website or a complex corporate contract?
Fourth is delivery. How do we actually get the value to them?
And fifth, which is often neglected, is after sales. How do we support them once they have the product to ensure they are actually successful with it?
And a business has to make a critical strategic decision regarding its channel mix. Are they going to use owned channels, like their own direct sales force, their own proprietary e-commerce website, or their own physical retail stores? Or are they going to utilize partner channels like indirect wholesale distribution, putting products in big box retailers, or utilizing partner websites?
This raises an incredibly important question of business strategy, and the text highlights the fundamental trade-off that executives agonize over.
Oh yeah, it's a huge dilemma.
Partner channels like selling your product through a massive retailer like Walmart generally lead to significantly lower profit margins. The partner is doing the heavy lifting of distribution, so they demand a large cut of the revenue.
Right. However, they allow you to massively and instantly expand your reach to millions of customers you could never reach on your own.
On the flip side, owned channels, especially direct-to-consumer ones, yield much higher margins because you keep all the profit. But they are incredibly expensive, risky, and time-consuming to build and operate.
The secret to a highly successful business model is finding the perfect, delicate balance between those two to maximize overall revenue while creating a cohesive, great customer experience.
Okay, so you've reached them through your precisely balanced channels. They've bought the product, value has been delivered. Now you have to establish the next block, customer relationships.
Right.
To use an analogy, this is where a business looks at its customer and decides if it wants to be their absolute best friend, a casual acquaintance they see occasionally, or just a cold metallic vending machine that dispenses goods for coins.
That is a fantastic way to put it. And it's critical to understand that these relationships are not static. They evolve over time based on the market. The text gives a great historical view of mobile network operators to illustrate this.
Right in the early days of cell phones.
Exactly. In the early days, the market was entirely untapped. Their relationship strategy was entirely focused on aggressive customer acquisition. They were literally giving away expensive mobile phones for free just to lock people into contracts.
Yeah, I remember getting a free phone.
Right. But once the market became totally saturated and everyone had a phone, the relationship strategy had to shift entirely. It moved from acquisition to retention, keeping you from switching to a rival and boosting the average revenue per existing customer by upselling data plans or family packages.
So what are the actual categories of relationships a business can choose from? The text starts with personal assistance. This is interacting with a real human being at the point of sale or via a call center. You have a problem, you talk to a person.
But then there's dedicated personal assistance, which goes much deeper. This is your private banker for a high net worth individual or a dedicated key account manager for a massive corporate client. It develops intimately over a long period of time. The bank knows your family, your business goals, your risk tolerance.
On the completely opposite end of the spectrum, you have pure self-service. The company provides the tools and the means for customers to completely help themselves, with absolutely no direct human relationship. Think of pumping your own gas.
But this is evolving rapidly, as the text notes, into automated services. This is where you mix the efficiency of self-service with highly sophisticated algorithms that recognize individual characteristics. It's Netflix or Amazon, offering you a highly customized movie or book recommendation based on your past behavior.
At its absolute best, the text notes, a well-designed automated service successfully simulates a personal relationship. It makes you feel like the company knows you, even though it's just code.
Which, let's be honest, can feel a little creepy when an algorithm predicts exactly what you want to buy before you even know you want it.
Oh, absolutely.
But from a business perspective, it is incredibly effective and scales infinitely. But my absolute favorite relationship categories mentioned in the text are communities and co-creation.
Tell me about those.
This is where the customer becomes part of the organism. The text mentions GlaxoSmithKline launching an online community for Alley, their over-the-counter weight loss product. They didn't just sell a pill and walk away.
Right.
They created a safe, dedicated space to deeply understand the emotional and physical challenges of overweight adults and to help them manage their expectations. They facilitated a community where users actually supported each other.
And co-creation goes even further than that. This is where the barrier between the company and the customer just dissolves. This is Amazon intentionally inviting customers to write detailed reviews, which actively creates value for other shoppers and builds trust in the platform.
Or YouTube, which is the ultimate example. YouTube relies entirely on its users to create the public content. The customer isn't just buying a service. They are an active, indispensable participant in the value creation. Without the users co-creating, the platform is literally just empty server space.
Okay, so let's take a breath and look at what we've built. We are delivering incredible, targeted value propositions to highly specific customer segments through the perfect mix of channels, and we have established the exact right relationship with them. The front stage is humming.
Yes, it is.
But now we have to walk down into the boiler room. We have to talk about survival, the financial pulse of the whole operation. How does the money flow in, and how does the money bleed out? This brings us to revenue streams and cost structure.
Yes, the fundamental question of revenue streams is, for what specific value are our customers truly, actually willing to pay? The text breaks this down into two main macro types. First, transaction revenues, which are simple, one-time customer payments. You buy a coffee, you pay once.
And second, recurring revenues, which are ongoing payments for the continuous delivery of a value proposition or post-purchase support.
Now, I don't want to waste your time defining basic concepts like what is a subscription. You're smart, you know what a gym membership is, but I want to look at the mechanics of how companies strategically choose these streams because there's so many ways to capture value.
Yeah, let's get into it.
First, you have the classic asset sale. You sell outright ownership rights to a physical product. Fiat sells you a car, you own it forever. Amazon sells you a physical book.
But then you have a usage fee. The fundamental mechanic here is the more you use the service, the more you pay. Telecom operators charging per minute of international calling or a hotel charging per night. The revenue is directly tied to the consumption of the resource.
Then there are subscription fees, selling continuous access to a service. And this is a massive trend. Think about Adobe. They used to sell Photoshop in a box for a massive one-time asset sale of maybe $700.
Right. I remember those huge boxes software used to come in.
Yeah, exactly. It was hugely profitable, but revenues were spiky, depending on new release cycles. They transitioned their entire business model to the Creative Cloud, a $50 monthly subscription. Now, a painful transition, but it smoothed out their revenue, made it predictable, and locked customers into an ongoing relationship.
Or think of World of Warcraft charging a monthly fee to access their servers. Next, the text mentions lending, renting, or leasing. This is granting someone the exclusive right to use a particular asset for a fixed period of time.
We mentioned Zipcar earlier. The customer gets the total benefit of driving a car without the massive capital cost of ownership, and Zipcar gets a recurring revenue stream that eventually exceeds the purchase price of the car.
And then we get into the highly lucrative world of licensing.
Oh, yes.
Right? So if I'm a brilliant tech company and I don't want to deal with the messy reality of building factories and managing supply chains, how do I capture value from just being smart? How does intellectual property turn into cash without manufacturing?
Licensing is exactly how. You give customers, usually other businesses, legal permission to use your protected intellectual property in exchange for a licensing fee. You don't have to manufacture a single physical item. The text uses Qualcomm as a prime example.
Oh, they make chips, right.
Well, they employ brilliant engineers to design cutting-edge microchips. They patent those designs globally, and then they just earn substantial licensing fees from the manufacturers like Samsung or Apple who actually build the physical devices. It is an incredibly high-margin revenue stream.
It's pure intellectual leverage. And then there's brokerage fees. This is deriving revenue from simply intermediating on behalf of two or more parties. Real estate agents taking a percentage of the home sale, or credit card providers taking a percentage of every transaction they successfully facilitate between a buyer and a merchant.
They don't own the house, they don't own the goods, they just own the transaction mechanism.
And finally, advertising, which we all know from media, but the text makes a vital point that it's rapidly moving beyond media into software and services. But here is the real strategic meat. How do you actually price all these streams?
The text details several distinct pricing mechanisms, and they are critical. You have fixed pricing, this is a static list price, or a price dependent on specific product features or the volume purchased. But then you have dynamic pricing, which changes in real time based on market conditions.
It's like negotiation or bargaining in a B2B setting, but the one I want to really dive into is yield management. The text mentions this is normally for perishable resources, like a hotel room or an airline seat. Explain the mathematical necessity behind this, because it's fascinating.
Yield management is pure economic physics. Let's look at an airline. The cost of flying a plane from New York to London is incredibly high, but it is almost entirely fixed. The fuel, the pilot salaries, the plane lease, they cost the exact same whether the plane is full or empty.
Right, the plane flies either way.
Exactly. The product they are selling is a seat on that specific flight. Now, the moment those cabin doors close and the plane pushes back from the gate, the value of any empty seat drops instantly and permanently to zero. It is a highly perishable asset. It cannot be stored and sold tomorrow.
Because tomorrow's flight is a different product entirely.
Yes. Therefore, the airline uses complex algorithms to dynamically drop or raise the price leading up to the flight to ensure every single seat is sold, maximizing the yield of that fixed cost journey. They would rather sell a seat for $50 than let it fly empty and earn zero.
That perfectly illustrates the pressure a business is under. All of these revenue streams flowing in are fantastic, but they have to be weighed against the crushing reality of Block 9, the cost structure. So what does this actually mean when an executive has to balance the books?
The text distinguishes between two extreme models of cost structure. On one side, you have heavily cost-driven models. We mentioned Ryanair and EasyJet earlier. Their entire corporate philosophy, their entire operational structure is maniacally focused on minimizing costs wherever physically possible.
They maintain the leanest possible management structure, they offer low-price value propositions, and they maximize automation.
How do they do it? They fly into cheaper secondary airports. They fly only one type of airplane, the Boeing 737, which means every pilot can fly every plane, and mechanics only need parts for one model. They ruthlessly strip away costs.
And on the exact opposite extreme, you have value-driven models. These companies are significantly less concerned with achieving the absolute lowest cost and are entirely focused on delivering premium value and highly personalized service.
Luxury hotels are the classic example here. They will gladly employ 3 staff members per guest and spend lavishly on fresh flowers and marble lobbies because their wealthy customer segment is more than willing to pay a massive premium for that flawless experience.
And within those models, the costs themselves have specific characteristics. You have fixed costs that stay the exact same no matter how much you produce the rent on your headquarters, executive salaries, manufacturing facilities.
Right. And you have variable costs that change proportionally with your volume. The text uses music festivals as an example. The more stages you build and bands you book, the higher your costs. But the really interesting strategic advantages come from economies of scale and economies of scope.
Let's break those down. Economies of scale are the cost advantages a business enjoys specifically as its output expands. If you are a massive retailer like Walmart, you are buying millions of units of a product, so you can demand significantly lower bulk purchase rates from the manufacturer. Your average cost per unit falls drastically compared to a mom-and-pop store buying 10 units.
And economies of scope are slightly different. There are cost advantages derived from a larger range of operations. If you are a massive consumer goods company with a giant, highly efficient marketing department and distribution network, they can promote and distribute multiple different product lines, toothpaste, shampoo, deodorant, without doubling or tripling the overhead costs. They spread the cost over a wider scope of activities.
Exactly. So we've mapped the entire front stage with the customers, the channels, and the value. We've mapped the financial pulse, balancing the incoming revenue and the outgoing costs. But to make all of this theoretical architecture a physical reality, you need a massive, functioning backstage engine. That brings us to Section 5. Key resources, key activities, and key partnerships.
Okay, let's look at Block 6. Key resources. These are the underlying fundamental assets required to make the whole business model actually work. Without these specific assets, you simply cannot create or deliver your value proposition. The text categorizes them into 4 distinct types.
Right, so first is physical resources. This is exactly what it sounds like. Walmart's massive global network of physical retail stores, or Amazon's incredibly complex IT, warehouse, and logistics infrastructure. These are usually highly capital-intensive to build. You need billions of dollars to replicate them.
Second is intellectual resources. And in the modern economy, this is becoming increasingly dominant. This includes brands, proprietary knowledge, patents and copyrights, partnerships, and customer databases.
Think of the massive value of Nike or Sony's brand recognition, or Microsoft's proprietary software code for Windows, or Qualcomm's chip designs, which we discussed earlier.
Right. These intellectual resources are incredibly hard and time-consuming to develop from scratch, but they are obscenely valuable once you possess them because they scale infinitely.
Third is human resources. Now, obviously, every single company needs people to function, but some business models rely on human capital uniquely and specifically. The text points to Novartis, the giant pharmaceutical company. Their entire multi-billion-dollar business model is entirely predicated on an army of highly experienced, brilliant scientists discovering new drugs.
And a massive, skilled sales force navigating the complex medical landscape to sell them. Their ultimate key resource isn't a factory. It's human brainpower and relationship skills. If their top scientists walk out the door, the business model basically collapses.
And the fourth category is financial resources. And this is vital to understand. This isn't just having cash in the bank. It's about leveraging financial instruments as a strategic weapon. The text gives a brilliant, nuanced example of Ericsson, the telecom equipment manufacturer.
Oh yeah, this blew my mind when I read it.
They essentially act as a bank for their clients. They actually borrow massive funds from banks and capital markets, and then they turn around and use that money to provide favorable vendor financing directly to their own customers.
Wait, let me make sure I understand this. They borrow money to loan money to their customer, so the customer can buy Ericsson's product.
Precisely. Telecom equipment is insanely expensive. A carrier in a developing nation might not have the capital to build a 5G network, and local banks won't lend to them. Ericsson steps in and says, "We will finance the purchase for you at a great rate on the condition that you buy all the equipment exclusively from us."
They leverage their massive financial resources and stellar credit rating to completely lock in the sale and block out competitors. It's a highly sophisticated use of a key resource.
So you have the physical warehouses, the patents, the scientists, and the capital. You have the resources. But resources just sitting there do nothing. What do you actually do with them? That brings us to Block 7, key activities. These are the most important, crucial actions a company must execute flawlessly to operate successfully.
It depends entirely on the model.
Yeah.
For a manufacturing firm like Ford or Apple, the dominant key activity is production, designing, making, and delivering a physical product in massive quantities or of superior quality. Their activities are entirely focused on supply chain management and factory efficiency.
But for a global management consultancy like McKinsey, or a world-class hospital like the Mayo Clinic, the key activity is problem-solving. They aren't making millions of identical widgets. They are coming up with bespoke, entirely new solutions to individual customer problems. This requires massive internal knowledge management, continuous training, and entirely different metrics for success.
And then there's platform or network activities. If your core resource is a platform, your primary activity is ruthlessly maintaining and growing it. eBay doesn't manufacture the goods sold on its site. Its key activity is continually developing its website infrastructure to ensure it doesn't crash, and managing the trust and safety algorithms.
Visa has to manage its massive global credit card transaction platform, ensuring a card swiped in Tokyo instantly talks to a bank in London securely. Microsoft has to manage the Windows operating system interface and support the developers building software for it.
Which logically leads us to the final building block of the entire canvas, Block 8, key partnerships.
Now, here's where I have to ask a genuinely skeptical question. If a company has a brilliant value proposition, a massive, eager customer segment, rock-solid channels, and they possess all these key resources and activities, Why on earth wouldn't they just do everything themselves? Why share the pie? Why let a partner take a cut of the profit or have a say in the operations? Look at Henry Ford. He literally owned the rubber plantations in Brazil and the iron mines to build the Model T total vertical integration.
That is the historic instinct of the industrialist, absolutely.
Yeah.
This raises an important question, but the text is unequivocally clear. In the modern hyper-specialized world, it is highly illogical and economically disastrous for a company to try to own all resources or perform every single activity by itself. It's too slow and too expensive.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
There are three main strategic motivations for creating key partnerships. First is simply optimization and economy of scale. This is the most basic form of outsourcing or buyer-supplier relationship. A car company doesn't need to manufacture its own windshield wipers. You partner with a specialist to share infrastructure and significantly reduce your costs.
Okay, that makes sense. The second motivation the text outlines is genuinely fascinating to me. Reduction of risk and uncertainty. The text points out that fierce competitors will often form a strategic alliance in one specific area while fiercely competing in another. The example they use is the creation of the Blu-ray optical disc format.
It's a perfect illustration of co-opetition.
Co-opetition, I love that.
You had a group of the world's leading consumer electronics manufacturers, companies like Sony, Panasonic, Philips, that are bitter global rivals. But they faced a massive problem. If they all released different, incompatible, high-definition DVD formats, consumers would be confused and refuse to buy any of them.
Feeling they would pick the losing format, like the old Betamax versus VHS war.
Exactly. So they cooperated. They formed a consortium to jointly develop the underlying Blu-ray technology. They shared the massive R&D costs and the risk of failure to establish a single universal standard.
Keep your friends close and your corporate rivals in a joint R&D venture. I absolutely love it. They collaborate backstage to build the arena, and then once the standard is set, they immediately go back to fiercely competing against each other front stage to sell their individual branded Blu-ray players to consumers.
Exactly. And the third motivation is the acquisition of particular resources and activities. You simply don't have the time, the capital, or the internal ability to build a capability yourself. A mobile phone manufacturer like Samsung is brilliant at making hardware, but writing a globally dominant operating system from scratch is incredibly hard.
So they partner with Google and license the Android operating system.
Right. They extend their own capabilities by seamlessly plugging into someone else's. Or an insurance company might have great actuarial models, but instead of hiring, training, and managing a massive, expensive direct sales force across every city, they rely on a vast network of independent brokers to sell their policies. They partner for the distribution channel.
You essentially rent the capabilities you lack to speed up your time to market. And when you finally step back, when you pull out of the weeds and look at all 9 of these blocks together,
You see the complete ecosystem: customer segments, value propositions, channels, customer relationships, revenue streams, key resources, key activities, key partnerships, cost structure.
when you put them all onto a single page, mapping how they interconnect, you have the complete business model canvas. It takes the seemingly chaotic, invisible, and deeply complex maneuvers of global business and turns them into a logical, entirely understandable blueprint.
It really does.
Whether you are that entrepreneur at Telenor trying to launch a new telecom service, an independent designer trying to figure out how to monetize your art, or just a regular consumer trying to understand why a company like Netflix or Amazon is suddenly acting a certain way or changing their pricing, this lens fundamentally clarifies the world.
It removes the mystery. It takes the magic of that beautiful, glowing city skyline we talked about at the beginning, and it walks you through the boiler room to show you the exact physics and engineering making it all possible.
It empowers you to understand the machinery of the modern world. And before we wrap up this incredibly deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Throughout this hour, we've talked exclusively about applying this canvas to massive global corporations, historical innovators, and disruptive startups. But what if you applied the exact same business model canvas to yourself?
That's a highly interesting, highly practical perspective.
Think about it deeply. Your specific skills, your university education, your years of experience, your personal network, those are your key resources. The daily work you do at your desk, your unique problem-solving abilities, the code you write or the art you create, those are your key activities.
And your employer, or if you're a freelancer, your portfolio of clients. They're your specific customer segments. Your salary or your hourly rate is your revenue stream.
And most importantly, your personal value proposition is the exact reason why they hire you, keep you, and promote you instead of choosing someone else.
Exactly. So the defining question for your own career is, how might you intentionally innovate your own personal value proposition tomorrow? Are you currently competing solely on performance, just working longer hours than the next guy?
Or can you shift to competing on getting the job done uniquely well? Can you find a new customer segment that values your key resources more highly? How can you upgrade your own personal operating system to capture more value?
It's a powerful, rigorous way to look at your own career trajectory and stop leaving your professional growth to chance.
We want to deeply thank you for joining us on this extensive deep dive into the architecture of modern innovation. Keep asking the hard questions, keep looking past the shiny products to find the boiler room blueprints, and keep looking at the complex world through a clearer lens.